So good to be with everybody. Hope everybody had a great weekend. So to pick up where we left off last week, we were going to talk about repeating cycles, and it's kind of really one of my favorite topics. And really repeating cycles in our lives and how we identify them and how we make them work for us. And you know, if you take a look at the life cycle of a butterfly, you know, it really talks about how cycles occur, and you know how you start one way through a cycle and how you end up another. And there's this allegory that I always like. There were two caterpillars sitting on a log, and they saw a butterfly fly by them. And one caterpillar said to the other, "Hey, you're never going to get me up in one of those things." And that's a lot what transformation is like. And that's really what cycles are all about. They're all about cycles of transformation. And we get the PowerPoint to work. There we go. So I'm assuming that most of us have seen Groundhog Day, all right, one of my favorite movies. And that's really all about cycles. In the movie, Bill Murray goes to this small Pennsylvania town where Puxatawny Phil comes out. He's the groundhog, right? If he sees a shadow, it has to do with where spring is going to have an early spring or a longer winter. And but Bill Murray keeps going through every single day, reliving it over and over again. And as he gets to one day, he learns one thing, and then the day starts all over again. So every day he's building his imputed knowledge about his little world that he's living in the movie. And then at the end of the movie, he ends up being like the first citizen of this little town. Everybody loves him, everybody knows him. And so he ends up at the end of the movie at a different place than he did from the beginning of the movie. Because in the beginning of the movie, if you remember, you know, he was kind of crotchety and, you know, wasn't really excited about, you know, being on this this newscast shoot in you know, doing the groundhog. So this, it's a funny movie. But it's really true to life, and it's always amazing to me how movies like that metaphorically can be so true to reality. And so a lot of what we end up doing every day really is like Groundhog Day. We keep doing the same things over and over again, and we keep getting the same result. And so how do we know we're in cycles? Now cycles are both you know, healthy and unhealthy. So we have healthy cycles and we have unhealthy cycles. So we have to look at them the same. And I think a lot of times people get caught up in saying cycles and everything's on the negative. And no, not so much. It runs both ways. So how do we know we're in a cycle? Okay, it could be a healthy cycle, a helpful cycle, or it could be an unhelpful cycle. So how do we know? Well, we look for reoccurring connected events. So like a reoccurring connected event is, I've had this experience before where the same thing has happened to me. And then you look for repeating recurring outcomes, okay? Why is it, this is a really key question, why is it that I keep getting this result, okay? I keep getting the same result. I keep ending up in the same place, okay? Now again, that could be a helpful place or a not so helpful place. Now, if you end up in the helpful place, then recognizing that cycle and keep doing more of that. If you end up in the not so helpful place, okay, well, that's the clue for you to say, okay, well, how did I get here? And if I keep ending up in the spot, how do I not have that happen, right? And that's about understanding the cycle. So then you backtrack, how did I get there? Are the same people or the types of people reoccurring? So think about it again in terms of helpful and not helpful. So, you know, we end up, there's this expression, it's one of my favorite ones, is that when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. So, you know, am I in a cycle where I have reoccurring experiences where I have helpful people coming to me and people that are willing to help me along? Or the inverse of that is, am I in a cycle where I'm really not attracting people that are helpful? And then what am I to learn from that? And the learning is how we break the cycle. We'll talk about that in a minute. And I think the other piece to help you figure out where you are in a cycle or if you're in a cycle is also the feelings. So, feelings are our emotional dashboard. They're kind of our internal system that tells us, if you think of your car dashboard, right? Our feelings and our emotions are what basically are giving us feedback about where we are. It's a feedback mechanism, okay? It's not meant to make you feel bad, all right? Or have you feel so exuberant, that you do things maybe you ordinarily wouldn't. It's not about that, right? It's about, oh, this feels good, I'm gonna keep doing this, okay? Or this is healthy, I'm gonna keep doing this. No, this is unhealthy, I should not do this. And I don't mean health like in exercise or diet, but it could be emotional, it could be any of those. And so look for reoccurring feelings. Ooh, I've had this feeling before, this doesn't feel good, okay? And so how do we know that we're in cycles, and being able to understand those cycles? And those cycles are, again, look at them in terms of not good or bad, don't judge, helpful, not so helpful, okay? All right. So our day-to-day lives are like satellites orbiting the Earth. Our day-to-day lives orbit cycles, right? So you think about our cycles and what we do, okay? And are we reinforcing the type of habits, which is a cycle? Are we reinforcing those at a level that is going to be helpful for us? And then conversely, right? Is my life orbiting habits, right? That aren't so helpful and that need to be modified. And so if you take a look at our day-to-day, right? Our day-to-day life. Now, there's some routines that are kind of neutral. They don't really matter too much. And there are other routines that actually can really be helpful. And so think about your day-to-day life as really if your life is orbiting your cycles, okay? So we were talking last week about repeating cycles and how we have an experience, and that experience puts us into observation, and then through observation we gain wisdom. And now that's what we're talking about today, right? How do we convert this cycle, experience to observation to wisdom? And it just keeps going. And as we understand the cycles that we're in, now we all develop over time. So a cycle that we felt that was helpful for us maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, maybe we moved on from that, and we've developed another cycle. Or maybe there's a cycle that we've always had that hasn't been all that helpful, and we've had it for a long time, and we keep getting dropped into the same outcome. So we keep getting dropped into the same outcome. That's we're being called to learn on that, is that, hey, if you want to have a different outcome, you've got to make different choices. And that's where you go from experience, right? Experience to observation to wisdom. We're now at the wisdom part, we're identifying the cycle, and then the wisdom is, do I want to make this cycle more robust? Do I want to change the cycle? Do I want to change the people I'm around? You know, I mean, we're all brought up, and of course we've all heard this, and I've used it, you know, with my kids, is, you're judged by the company you keep. And, the company you keep really has a lot to do with your energetic levels. And so when you're keeping people around you, where you have, healthy relationships that are developing, and that you're giving each other, it could be friend, it could be, spouse, it could be coworkers, all those types of things, right? Are these relationships developing in a way where that you're giving back to each other and you're helping each other develop? I just have a friend of mine who he and I kind of became disconnected for about 10 years, lifelong friend, we had a little contact here or there, but not much. And I was entering into a different cycle of my life where I was having different habits and wanted different outcomes. And, he hadn't quite gotten there yet. And it's interesting how as he was entering in a new cycle of his life that was, let's say, healthier, he and I naturally just reconnected because we're in the same place. So, you want to be looking for people and helping people, where you can and where they want to be helped, really get into cycles that can complement each other, complement, both of you. And so you get into that experience to observation to wisdom. So choices. It took me a while. I couldn't remember Monty Hall's name. It had been a while. But so these are all choices, right? So we're in cycles. I just kept thinking door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. Who was that? It tells you how quickly, right, things change. And so really when we're in cycles, our cycles are created by the choices that we make. And so let's just talk about what those might be, right? So if I decide that, I don't know. I decide that I want to learn how to speak a foreign language. I'm just kind of making this up as we're going along. That's a choice that I've made. Okay, so I've made that choice. But if I make a choice not to be consistent in learning the language, well, then I'm really never going to learn it. And that's a choice. If I make a choice to be around people that aren't really supportive of either where I am or where I want to go, that's an equal choice. And so we as we understand, as we're moving into the wisdom phase, right, of having our experiences and our observation, the wisdom piece really rests a lot on choice. And am I making those choices that are in alignment with where I want to go or where I am? And I think that really requires a lot of introspection, because it's pretty easy to make the continual choices that take us off our path, right? It's pretty easy to do that because we're not aware of it. So, if we're used to eating certain things, for instance, that might not be the best for us, well, our body's conditioned to that. So in essence, what happens is that the body becomes the mind. And then the body because the body is used to having sugar, or it's used to having salt, or it's used to having whatever it is, right? And then the body actually can override the mind, right? Unless you're aware of the fact that, wait a minute, this is a choice. And so, committing to saying, well, I want to learn a foreign language. Well, committing to it's a choice. Not sticking with it is an equal choice. Or sticking with it, or committing to, 15 minutes every morning, okay? That's a choice. So we talked last week about observation, right? So observation gives us a neutral viewpoint so we can identify, in this case, recurring cycles, right? So if I'm in observation, I can identify a recurring cycle. I know what it feels like. I can feel my emotions. Oh, wait a minute, this feels exactly like I did 3 years ago when I had this other experience. Or reoccurring cycle. Oh, wait a minute, you know what? That person reminds me a lot of this person, and I had this circumstance, and you know what? That's not feeling great. Or the inverse, okay? Yeah, you know what? When I did this, I felt great. And I'm going to do more of that, okay? All cycles. And then when we're neutral in our observation, that's what allows us to be in that area where we're floating in the sea of possibilities, which becomes our choices. And when we make certain choices is when we break the cycle. So, how do we break the cycle? So there's this expression I always like: you can't outrun a bad diet. So if my cycle, and I was actually in one of these cycles for a while, that, if I'm not taking care of myself and I'm not eating right, not getting the right sleep, it doesn't matter how much I exercise, I won't get any more fit. So you can't outrun a bad diet. So then what do? Well, you have to make a choice. You have to make a choice that's going to support where you want to go. So you can't outrun a bad diet. And even though your will might say in the moment, I want to go out, and in this case, just use this, I want to go out and run. Well, but if you haven't made the right choices along the way to break the cycle or to reinforce the cycle that will allow you to go out and go for a run. Well, if you don't do that, well, then you're not going to have that outcome. And so it's about making choices that either support or break cycles. And they are absolute choices. And it's super simple to break a cycle, because once you can identify the repeating components of the cycle, once you can identify them, then you know the off ramp for the choice. And actually, I'll tell you one of the cycles I was in. I was in a cycle where instead of exercise in the morning, I'd exercise at night. And because I was in a work cycle where I needed to get into work early. And so what I would do is I'd work out at night. The problem was I was eating later. My body was more revved up. I didn't sleep as much. And my metabolism was off. And no matter how hard I worked out at night, it really didn't matter because I wasn't getting really enough rest, which is really because I was getting maybe 4 hours of sleep a night, maybe 5. And that's just not enough. And so one day it occurred to me that, well, wait a minute, this is a cycle. I got to get back onto my old cycle because that cycle worked. And so once you're in observation, then you can find the off ramp to the choice that you need to make to disrupt that cycle and get onto a different one. So how to, right? So we were talking about be aware of recurring outcomes. So when you have an outcome that you like or an outcome that you prefer not to have, okay? The one that you like is telling you to keep doing more of that. The one that you would prefer not to have is a learning point that's telling you that, hey, wait a minute, you're feeling like you don't like this, you're feeling that for a reason. And the reason why you're feeling that way is because you got to break this cycle. This is not the cycle that you want. Try to match your emotions or feeling from past cycles to current cycles. So again, go back to those feelings, right? Our feelings are our very best diagnostic tools for where we are, okay? Very best diagnostic tools. You don't ignore them, you don't suppress them. You don't become them though, right? You don't want to become the emotion, all right? Because when you become the emotion, then you move into judgment and then you lose your ability to be able to, scan the environment for opportunities. Once you've identified a cycle, backtrack to a prior cycle and the choices that you made and replicate those. And then lastly, you choose a direction and an outcome that you desire. And all of the choices that you make really should be about, be in alignment with the outcome that you want. And you want to create that type of cycle. So, a lot of times we get stuck in default cycles because we're not really consciously or aware or planning the outcome that we want. We kind of just let things happen to us. And you can have cycles like that. But even once you find yourself in there, so you go to observation, and the observation brings you to wisdom, and then that wisdom point is when you can actually make the choice to break the cycle and create a new cycle that's more in alignment with what you want. So I hope this was helpful, and have a great week, and I'll see everybody next Monday. Take care.